Nigeria's inflation rose to 33.95% in May 2024 from 33.69% in April. Now, this is a significant increase compared to May 2023, which was about 22.41% at that time. However, the monthly increase slowed slightly in May to about by about 2.14% compared to April 2.29%. And we see that food prices, which are our major inflation driver, reached 40.66% year on year in May 2024 rather, while core inflation excluding food and energy reached 27.04% year on year in May 2024. Now, joining me to make sense of these numbers, what they mean for businesses and consumers alike, I have Olamide Ologunagbe, research analyst at Commercial Partners. Olamide, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for coming to our studios in the first place.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you around. And we also have Dr. Femi Egbesola, Chairman, Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria, ASBON. Doctor, it's nice to have you come to our studios.
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning to you, gentleman and lady. Let's start with Olamide. Now, inflation figures have increased, though at a slower rate. How impressive do you think this is?
Oh, okay. For one, I think the inflation slowing down seems to be a great news, but where we are going to is far beyond where we are right now. So as much as we want to clamor for the highs or for the slow pace, I think that there's so much more to be done to actually caution it. And given that our food inflation still seems to be on the increase, and that has been the major driver of the inflation. So I think that if that is being addressed and other shocks are put in place, and over time we tend to study the trend, then we can call for a big celebration. But for now, it's taking baby step, and it's just one step at a time, which of course I think are graduate to taking the bigger steps at the end of by the end of the year.
Okay. Now, Dr. Egbesola, let me come to you. Now, you are the chairman of a business association or a business group, and we understand that this could have implication on jobs. Now, when you look at the numbers and what you have in your books, is there any correlation, and how does it affect you?
Well, at the moment, we're happy that there's something at least to give us a good light in terms of inflation, that perhaps something being done somewhere by government is having certain impacts. But if we come to the realities when it comes to businesses, we have not really seen the impact. We have not been able to see any improvements in our sales, any improvements in other factors that allows businesses to flow. At the moment, we still continue to have businesses closing up. We still continue to have multinationals leaving the country. We still continue to have higher interest rates. And these are the indicators that help to gauge whether we are really doing well or not in business. So for me, it has not really impacted us positively, but we hope that over time we'll begin to see the impact.
But Dr. Egbesola, we've seen monetary policies come to play in a couple of months back by the MPC. Do you feel optimistic, or are you in support of how the MPC has gone so far in addressing the inflation figures?
Well, I really do not think that the raise in MPC has actually impacted well on businesses. In other climes, it's one of the two that is used to fight inflation, but our own structure here is a different ball game. It has not really impacted the way we would have wanted it to be. And it's also an indication that there should be more impactful interventions from other players, particularly in the fiscal policy areas and fiscal policy makers too, that will also help to drive down inflation beyond just raising NPR. Raising NPR at the moment has done more damage to businesses, particularly micro, small, and medium businesses, than good. And at the same time, too, if you look at the streets, you will discover that there's a lot of hardship, there's a lot of poverty in the streets, meaning that we are not getting any gain from the raise in NPR. Rather, it has more or less stifled businesses. It has made it impossible for some of us to be able to access funding through the banks, and at the same time, it has made us to become less competitive in the international market.
All right, let me quickly go back to Olamide now. Well, it's no news when you look at the spending, 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 the sp when you look at the impact on the consumer spending in terms of the rates, when you look at the implications and the economic growth and the fact that Nigerians would have to spend more even as we continue to see a rise in these inflation figures, how do we put back money in the wallet of Nigerians, knowing fully well that whether or not the CBN continues to roll out policies, but then we do not have that in the fiscal side of things, the price will continue to go up. Is there a way that Nigerians can heave a sigh of relief?
Well, absolutely. Given that, according to reports that said that Nigerians spend over 50% of their income on food and transport, and I think one way to put money back into the purse of the consumers has to be from putting down the prices of goods and services. Now, one for one is food. Imagine having a salary of X and you're buying XY. How do you match up for that? So if they're subsidized food prices, first of all, then we can see money go back also for transport. But we've also seen the likes of Lagos State with the BRT transport cut. Also, we've seen that the federal government is trying to put down the CNG buses to actually ease transportation fare. But the best way right now to put money back in the consumer wallet is cutting down with food, because we almost survive at the end of the day. And if all of these have been taken into consideration, and there's the food price decrease, and of course the subsidy for transport, I think in a way we sort can put a little bit into the wallet of the consumers. But of course that's for the longer term, but that's for the short term, but longer term, there are other things to be done by increasing economic development, increasing, spurring economic growth too, and of course facilitating, making sure that your human capital is really well informed and inclined. But at the moment, given where inflation is, and given the situation that we have, because food is like the major thing right now, any little uproar in price, everybody goes out. But if we can actually settle that when it comes to food and transport, one for one, I think that we can put a little bit of change into the consumer wallet for a start.
Okay. Now, Dr. Egbesola, we see, just as Olamide has said, a couple of things that can be done. But then let's look at what the government is trying to do through the Accelerated Stabilization and Advancement Plan, called the ASAP recommendations. Now, we're talking about importation of paddy rice, if possibly the suspension of import duty and VAT on specific items, including import duty exchange rate peg. Now, if that comes into being, how much of a relief would this be, and how significantly will this help reduce inflation in Nigeria?
Yes, like Olamide did mention, the major driver of inflation is food. So if we have this ASAP plan bringing down, encouraging the import of some of these products, bringing down some of the taxes that are attached to doing business around that sector, it will indeed bring down inflation in the real sense. But for me, that's a short-term development. We should be thinking of long-term policies that will sustain businesses. By the time we begin to open our doors, our borders, to bring down some of these food items, it also comes down to threaten the local manufacturers, local farmers, and local producers of some of these products. What we really need to do is for government to begin to look at how they can incentivize that sector, how they can empower those who are players in that sector, so that we will be able to do our business well and grow and be able to scale. Without that, we cannot continue to depend on importation, because it's not the best way for us to go. One of the best ways for government to also generate revenue at this time is to encourage exports. So if we are not exporting and rather importing, it is not a good way for us to go as a country and as an economy. We need to continue to see how to improve the ease of doing business so that more people can come to the sector to do businesses. We also need to look at how to make the factors that support doing business to be affordable and accessible to those who want to go into business. That's the best way out. But in the short time, I believe it will bring down inflation.
But then, Dr. Egbesola, in as much as these policies looks good on paper, as you've mentioned, we noticed that multinationals are leaving the country, citing unfavorable business environment, and you are also one in that business or manufacturing. I can't help but just ask you, how are you and your members holding up? What's the story like when we begin to see these companies leave and we have local industries also struggling? But then it's been said that it might just be a leeway for local producers to step into that vacuum and begin to operate. Do you think it could be a win-win for the local industry?
Well, to us, On one hand, it's no good news. It's no good news because many of these multinationals have micro, small business owners along their value chain, supplying one thing or the other, playing one part of the business or the other. When these multinationals leave, it also means that all of those in the value chain will be rendered jobless. Their businesses will definitely suffer. They have to begin to look for new markets to sell their input and other things that they provide. At the same time, too, it also leads to job losses. More people will be jobless, and when they are jobless, they will not have that consuming power. They will not have that power to be able to also buy products and services in the market, meaning that the consumers' purchasing power become reduced over the line. At the same time, too, you discover that many of these multinationals comes with their technology, and when they come here, there's a lot of technology transfer from them to the local businesses. This is also going to go with them. Unfortunately, many of these businesses are not being bought over by small, medium businesses, but most times by also bigger businesses that already has their own different value chain and may not be able to sustain the existing value chain of the exitors. That to us is not too good for us. And we believe that it's time for government to begin to look at how to make certain intervention come to play to be able to sustain the businesses of these multinationals so that they can begin to, one, look inward for their raw materials instead of depending on export, two, be able to access funding that will help them to do their business better and liberalize policies that are not working for them. We really, really need them here. They've played a lot in developing and growing our GDP, and the best way to go is to look at how to salvage those who are already here. Leaving the country is also sending very negative signals to other investors. Nobody will want to come to a climate where the existing ones who have been there for years are leaving. And that, to me, is not a good one. The president cannot be going around the world looking for investors when the ones we have in the country are all also exiting or downsizing. Also, by and large, there is a need for government to begin to look at how to develop structure around our economy, particularly on ease of doing business, so that business will become sustainable and profitable.
Okay. Well, let me go to Olamide now. Let me just throw in the minimum wage conundrum here. We'll have your reaction and that of Dr. Egbesola. Now, there are fears that if this isn't handled well, it could lead to further inflationary pressures. I've seen on the handle, that is X, where someone who is a seller actually said that once the minimum wage has been increased and it is approved, that it will also increase the price of his merchandise. And someone asked him, why would you want to increase when it's not as though it directly or indirectly affects you? It's most especially it's just to ensure that people have enough funds to actually live and be able to purchase what is needed in the market. Now, Olamide, when we have a government who does not have control over prices in the market, we don't have a market price mechanism in the country, and the minimum wage is increased, and it is not well handled, and we don't have people who actually monitor and ensure that people stick with what is obtainable or sensible in terms of what is being sold in the market. Now, how do you think that will play out?
Okay, one for one, I think that the invisible hand will play out. But let's draw an analogy. So when there's an increase in wage, it means that businesses will have to pay more for labor, their cost of services, cost of production tends to increase. And as a result of that, me on the other hand, if I have an increase in salary, it means that I can buy more, which of course drives demand, and everybody then tends to increase price, obviously. Businesses increase price so that they can meet up with their bottom line, and of course meet up with the minimum profit that they can make, given that there's an increase. Now, if all of that happen, and given the situation where we are right now, inflation, there's too much money pursuing fewer goods, that tends to play out. But we understand the reason why NLC is actually clamoring for an increase. We know that the last time this happened was in 2019. And also, given that the price at which it was to what it is now, the money can't even buffer anything at the moment. And so that's the reason why they're clamoring for it. But that's where the government monetary policy and the fiscal policy now tends to play. They have to put in the shock to make sure that inflationary triggers don't go above. So as much as there's the part where they're clamoring for more increase, there's a part where the government has to take in place of cutting down their cost of governance in order to offset that, because our debt has been piling up. We don't want more debt for recurrent expenditure. We need the debt to actually put into capital expenditure, which of course can spur growth, and we have the investors coming in and there's economic growth and development at the end of the day. So while the two parties are trying to go back and forth, I think that this is where they have to put their heads together and see, oh, as much as this can lead to this, because if there's an increase in wage, there's an increase in inflation. But of course, if there are shocks, and there are shocks to buffer it from the government side in order to make sure the inflationary triggers don't go above, then I think that we can have a balanced way at the end of the day.
Okay, so let me ask Dr. Egbesola, so what do you think about this? You are a business owner within the ecosystem. Are you going to be increasing the price of your goods and services when we have a minimum wage that has been approved? Because I know that the organized private sector has come out to say that they can't pay 100,000, 250,000, that even 62,000 is way above what they can afford to pay as minimum wage. So in order to cover the cost, are you also going to be increasing the price?
Well, everybody in business is in business to make profit. So if there is a mechanism that is going to make me lose my money and not make profit, then I have to fight it. One best way to fight increase in cost of production is to put the price down for the consumers to pay. So ordinarily, you should expect that most business owners, if not all, will put a higher price on their goods and services immediately we have a minimum wage. And another factor that should play out is that we should begin to look at how to devise a means that the minimum wage for civil servants may not necessarily be the general minimum wage for SMEs, because that may actually cause a lot of issues. When it is approved, it becomes a law. It means everybody must comply with the law. But how many SMEs today can pay 62,000 or 60,000 or thereabouts for the employees? That's going to be very, very, very difficult for now.
Okay, so what are you suggesting, that there should be a different negotiation in terms of what the minimum wage, what is payable by the organized private sector as minimum wage as against what the Nigerian government would agree to pay? Is that what you mean?
That's exactly what I mean. That may seem very alien here, because in most economies, they have one minimum wage across board. But with our situation at the moment, I would recommend that minimum wage for SMEs should be different from that of government. And that's the only way we can sustain whatever amount of money is eventually approved as minimum wage.
Olamide, do you think that will work?
I, for one, don't think. Well, as much as I would love to agree with that, because, I mean, they are obviously still struggling. And, of course, they can't meet up to the 62,000 naira that has been going on about. And given that civil servants want an increase, but of course we know that the SMEs not all SMEs can pay for it. But I think that having a minimum balance where both parties can actually play. So there's the part of, now then there will be the part of the, oh, you're a civil servant and a private sector, but the prices of these goods don't even matter if you're an SME or you're a civil servant. You all have to pay the same price at the end of the day. So while I don't think that there should be a difference in the price that the civil servant should pay and the SMEs should pay, but I think that there can be a level ground where they can meet each other. But of course, we know the economic implications of all of this, and they have to be taken into consideration. And the government has to step in and make sure that they can buffer for the shocks that happen at the end of the day.
Yeah, Olamide, you've spoken to the monetary side and the fiscal sides of things when it comes to solutions that can be proffered. Now, looking ahead, when do you think Nigerians can begin to expect significant relief from high prices, or should we just say inflation?
Okay, so like I said in the beginning, where we are going is actually still far from where we are at the moment. As of January, our inflation was at 29.9, sorry, and now we are over 30%. Now imagine what it is, and of course we know that the CBN is saying that at the end of the year we'll see inflation come to 24%. The Wale Edo has also said that, Minister of Economy has also said that 24%. We've seen World Bank also project around 24%. So everybody is still clamoring, oh, that there are ways that it can actually still come down, given that they feel that the reforms will be efforts, and of course everyone will benefit for it. But I, for one, I can't say if this will happen at the end of the day. Like I said, there have to be policies in place. We've started seeing it cool down at the moment, which seems to be great. But of course, there are still baby steps. One for one is insecurity. Now, if we don't address the issue of insecurity, our transport challenges, our supply chain challenges, I don't think we'll see this inflation come down. So imagine trying to buy a basket of tomato in Jos, and it's coming down to Lagos is over 100,000. Why? Because there's an increase in price, the transport, the subsidy. And also, we've seen reports say that farmers that even go to their farm, they have to pay to these bandits before they even go to the farm. Now, imagine when they go to the farm and they come out and they remit half of what it is that they've harvested, and before it even comes down here, there's a whole lot to be considered. So I think that if all of these are not even addressed, we might not see the inflation come down. But that obviously, with reforms in place, and of course the one that is coming in, the loan that has been approved from World Bank, which of course is for a short term. If all of those baby steps are well arranged, I think that we can now take our very big step by the end of the year, and one for one, we might see inflation come down.
Now, Dr. Egbesola, do you think things would have been this bad? Do you think the rate at which the inflation rates rose in the course of 1 year, do you think it would have been that rapid if the government at inception had not come out to announce fuel subsidy removal and later on the harmonization or should I say the floating of the naira? Do you think it would have been that bad? Because a lot of people felt that step was like the log of wood that actually scattered the entire bunch.
I agree with those lot of people. Those pronouncements, those two major policy issues at the end of the day drove inflation that we have now. And for me, it would have been far better if there are some intervention put in place before those pronouncements. We would have expected government to be able to deal with the issue of power before that pronouncement, such that many will not rely on generator to power their factories. We will have expected government to provide the CNG vehicles that they promised to provide before the pronouncement, so that transportation issue will have been dealt with. We will have expected a large intervention in the agricultural sector, so that we'll have more food on the table before the pronouncement, such that at the end of the day, when the pronouncement is made, we will have a lot of soft landing being here and there for those critical factors that every Nigerians are actually impacted upon with. And now that the pronouncement has come, we have all seen the indication, and we have seen this heavy rise in inflation. We begin to now want to encourage government to look at how to now fight this inflation, and they cannot fight it alone. It has to be bringing all the stakeholders on the table to drive the inflation down. That's the only way to go. Some of these policies, as good as they are not really working in our climate here, because there are other mitigating factors that is beyond government alone. So there's need for us to come together to fight this inflation, and there's need for us to begin to also see the beauty of inflation. Inflation also has its advantages, particularly for some form of businesses. So for those who are at an advantage side, we need to begin to now explore those advantages. One of it is that it makes our product more affordable for the international community now. So we need to begin to look at how to begin to export our products outside the shores of this country, so that we can also earn foreign exchange that will also assist our naira to stabilize. Inflation too, at the same time, help us to be able to think out of the box. Many of us are now adopting technology more in the way we do our businesses than before, because we just must find a way to bring down prices. So some of the stability we see now in this inflation is because most of us have priced our product and services to the peak. It's already at the threshold. We can no longer increase prices because of the situation of the economy. So we have to find ways to be able to cope and make profit even with the existing situation. And that helps us to be more innovative and creative with the way we are doing our business now. Those are some of the advantages that we also need to tap on while government work with other stakeholders in bringing down inflation. We don't want to see this figure, like she said, at the end of this year, still rising.
Before I go back to Olamide, quickly, Dr. Egbesola, now July is around the corner, and we are actually expecting another MPC meeting. But so far, how is the cumulative 750 basis points hike in the year impacting on operations, production, and access to funds?
Well, the impact is definitely negative. Any hike in MPR does business no good, because at the moment it's difficult to access fund. Now it is more expensive and even more difficult to access fund. And that's why you see that we have the highest debt profile in the history of the country. We have so much debt now that the owners are the debtors are unable to pay. And that's not too good for us. Businesses cannot thrive with their own money alone. They need other people's money. And the only place or the major place you can get other people's money is from the bank. So when it is expensive for you to get, it may also hinder you from being able to get it. Because by the time you had inflation with high interest rate, what does it match with your profits? That's another issue. We have to also find ways, particularly government, must find ways to ease access to funding. And one way to fight access, to assist in easing access to funding is to begin to look at how to decrease MPR rates. MPR rate, yes, is expected to fight inflation, but at the moment we have not seen the impact. We need it to be reversed. Many businesses are ailing, many are already dead because they cannot survive. One of the major issues is the issue of inflation. So I want to use this opportunity to also implore government to look at other ways of creating funding for the SMEs, particularly those who are in the startup level. Startups cannot access fund at this rate and do business. There must be other platforms that they can access funding, perhaps even at single-digit interest rates, such that they will have a level playing ground with all the members of the private sector who are already big and be able to survive and scale. Those are the ways that we can grow. If we are not scaling our business, we will not be able to grow our economy. If you ask yourself, how many businesses have been able to migrate from small to medium and medium to big for the past 5 or so years? None, because the environment is not right. Okay. If they don't migrate, we will continue to be in one position. So government must be determined and be strategic about making sure that business environment is improved in all manners so that businesses can be encouraged to start and those who have started can be encouraged to grow.
Okay, so let me quickly go back to Olamide now. Would you also advocate for a reversal of the monetary policy rates? When you look at other economies, you look at the UK, the US, they have been steadily increasing the benchmark rates, as against you have a country like South Africa and probably Ghana that have actually stayed on that particular benchmark rates. What do you think would work from Nigeria at this time? Because it seems as though these rate hikes are not really working.
Okay, so while the central bank interest are starting to increase interest rate, of course we've seen that play out in the month-on-month inflation decreasing from 2.19 to from 2.24 at the moment. Now, while that plays out, of course, like Doctor said, that is where business go to borrow loans. Of course, this business will have the debt and the equity where they have to facilitate growth from their businesses. And of course, if the cost of debt is high and they have to pay higher interest rates, and they in turn have to increase the prices of goods and services. At the moment, inflation is even high and purchasing power of consumers have reduced. So how do they even match up to even pay for it? So I do not clamor for a back because at the moment we start seeing the effect of an increase in the MPR play out. But of course, I do not expect that the CBN increase interest rate at this moment. So there's the part where it should allow for the previous hike play out and see where it turns lead to. But of course, it has it definitely gives a dangerous side to businesses because they definitely have to increase expansion. But of course, at the moment, they can't go to the bank because of the fear of the interest rate affecting them, and purchasing power of consumers have been eroded. And so how do they even match up to even meet up to the cost of the capital and even pay for the interest? But I think that a steady hold of the interest rate given from the likes of the US and UK that you mentioned, if that happens and we'll see what the inflation numbers become in the next few months, then we can tell if there should be a reason for a hike or not. But of course, we understand the reason why there is a hike in the interest rate. That's because to combat inflation at the end of the day. And of course, we've seen where the CBN governor had said that he's going to keep increasing interest rates because he has to meet the desires, the benchmark of which they've placed it to be. But at the long run, we'll also have to think about the consumers, we have to think about the SMEs, we have to think about the people, because we all need all of this to grow at the end of the day. Imagine the consumers plus the investment and plus government expenditure, and there's an increase in export and there's less import. That will spur economic growth at the end of the day. But I think we'll see how that plays out in inflation figures in coming months.
But I guess the government is actually putting all this into consideration. That is why it is looking at or tinkering with the possibility of removing import duties on some items. Maybe that could be a cushioning for some businesses that are into importation. But we don't know how this is going to eventually end. But the bottom line is something needs to be done to deal with the issue around the rising inflation figures, both on the monetary side and on the fiscal side. And we hope that this administration will be able to get it right when it comes to these policies being put to bed. Olamide Ologunagbe, research analyst, commercial partners, thank you so much for joining us and talking extensively on this particular discussion.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm Dr. Femi Egbesola, Chairman, Association of Small Business Owners of Nigeria, ASBON. It was nice also talking to you and, of course, tapping from your resourcefulness.
Thank you for the opportunity.